Welcome to the podcast. This week we have a guest, and this is something we're going to try and start getting going a little more often. Next week, I believe we're going to have a guest as well. So start bringing on members and different staff to chat, tell us their stories, and even just their expert, kind of their expertise area. And so this week we have Aaron Reistad. He is a member. He takes my noon class fairly often. He's been here for a little over a year. What I like to talk about, how I think one way we kind of pulled Aaron in is Aaron came to some social events that we had before. I think he was a member. You were at our pool party, right?
Yes, sir.
Yep. So glad those have some benefit in pulling some people in. So
it's always my favorite event, the pool party.
The pool party, yeah. That was the hoof-hearted one. That was a good time. But yeah, so we have Aaron here, and Aaron's going to. I'll pass it over to him in a second. He's going to go ahead and tell us his story, and he's got a really cool story. I watched a video all about that, and maybe we'll repost that after we post the podcast, just to kind of wrap everyone's head around it further. It was a really well done video, just wrapping it encompassed everything he's kind of been through and showed us like how he's been able to like persevere through a disability and do CrossFit extremely well and effectively. But kind of turn it over to Aaron. He's going to tell us our story.
All right. Well, thank you both so much for having me. It's an honor to be here. My name is Aaron Reistad, like Brandon said, and I spent the majority of my life in Colorado. And I, while there, was involved with kind of some of the stereotypical Colorado things, hiking, rock climbing, skiing, snowboarding. And, growing up, I was involved in a variety of athletics. I spent my whole life wrestling, got involved with track, cross country. And then in college, kind of transitioned that into mixed martial arts and some longer distance running, did a few half marathons. And then after undergrad, had the opportunity to go to graduate school at Florida State. And in the first year there, I was able to run my first marathon, and then also happened to pick an apartment walking distance away from CrossFit Tallahassee. And I had heard of CrossFit before, but hadn't really known much about it. Kind of had like this negative stereotype about what it was. Like these CrossFitters, they think they're so cool, But as soon as I went in there and actually looked at it, I was hooked. And I, 10 years later, am still here. And, for me, it was a great way to meet people in a city that I hadn't been to before, and also have great workouts that pushed me to levels that, obviously I never would on my own. And so I just fell in love with it there. And so after year one of graduate school, I drove from Florida up to Delaware, where I had an internship at the University of Delaware. And a couple weeks after getting there, began having some increased difficulty with my sight, so I'd be driving around and street lights were harder to tell what the colors were. The text on my phone was harder to read, text on the computer was harder to read. And so I just thought, it's time that I need glasses. And, I had never seen an optometrist before. I had always had 20/20 vision. So I just thought it was glasses time. And so went to the optometrist and found out that I had a swollen optic nerve, which glasses don't fix. And so from there was sent to a neurologist, and, they wanted to check if I had a brain tumor or multiple sclerosis. Didn't end up having either of those. So then got sent to a neuro-ophthalmologist. And, on July 3rd of 2014, my dad and I, went through a variety of different things where they were poking my eyes, dilating them, taking pictures. And finally, at the end of the day, the doctor came in and told us that I had a super rare hereditary disease known as Leber's Hereditary Optic Neuropathy, LHON, which basically just means that my optic nerve was kind of atrophying, and that there is also no known cure for LHON. So that was incredibly difficult to hear, as someone who had previously, throughout my life, anytime I'd been presented with a problem, been able to, outwork it or out-medicate it or, rest and get over it. And so I was at this point being presented with this problem that I wouldn't be able to just, fix. And that was incredibly difficult to hear, just in general, let alone, figuring out what that meant for the rest of my life. I still had half of graduate school left. I had to go back for year 2. I didn't know what it meant for life after graduate school. I didn't know how I was going to drive around anymore. I didn't know how I was going to do homework. I didn't know how I was going to do CrossFit or hike or snowboard. And so I had to make the decision about what to do with my life. And ultimately, maybe I was in a little bit of stage of denial, but decided to return to graduate school and try and finish year 2. And, it was definitely the hardest year of my life. And I never would have been able to do it without all the people around me, including, I used to go to the 5 a.m. class throughout grad school. And so every morning at 4:45, one of my friends would come pick me up and drop me off. And it was really, interesting for the CrossFit community as well as, everyone else in Florida for them to transition from this guy they'd known the year before with perfect vision and was super capable to the new kind of me. And everyone did it very seamlessly and provided a ton of support. And I was able to, make it through that second year of graduate school and, been living my life ever since. I got into some motivational speaking after that for a while and then moved to Columbus about 6 years ago. Was at a couple different CrossFit gyms before joining CrossFit Grandview about a year ago, like Brandon said. And, it's been a great experience here so far. I'm sure we can talk more about that, but that's kind of my story a little bit.
Wow. So first, I can see it. So you might not see Kate's tearing up and crying over here because she has some really firsthand experience with vision loss, and she I don't know when
It's really
it was
amazing what you've done.
Yeah,
It really is.
In 2017, she found out both of her retinas were detached, and then had surgery to fix those, and then one went bad, and then she lost all her vision in one eye, so she can see out of one eye, but it was a few years of 4 or 5 surgeries and laying face down and doing all of that for a good year, and so.
No one can understand how scary that is, And I just lost vision in one eye, and there was, and I think we spoke at the pool party actually, and you can see shadows a little bit, yeah.
Yeah, the way I describe my sight is like fog or frosted glass, and then with a bright light on the other side. So I can see enough to, once I know a space, get around, but. When I started here a year ago, I think it was probably a transition for Brandon, for other coaches to kind of understand what I needed, and I did my best to kind of help them understand that. Yep. But now I've been here for a year. I know the space. And
you get around really well now.
Yeah, so I think it throws a lot of people off, too, because I do get around well enough to where I think a lot of people don't know. So that when they see me running, which we can talk more about, like what running looks like for me here, but on a tether with someone, I think it confuses some people because they're like, what's that guy doing?
Yeah, because you would know, especially to someone who's casual, if you don't take their class, you're not in the class with them often. Like you also move incredibly well. Like you described all the, you did every athletic activity under the sun and really hard, challenging ones too. And you Olympic lift really well. You move really well. You've got muscle ups. You're a fantastic CrossFit athlete overall. And so anyone's going to see you, they're going to think you're going to have any impairment until maybe they see you, need a little help on a run or not be able to read your rower or something like that. But yeah, you get along and to the point where even when I'm coaching you, honestly, like, I appreciate you reminding me too, because I'll forget. I just will. I'll just completely forget. I think you've just completely I'm like, oh shoot, yeah. I'm going to jump behind him and make sure I'm reading his meters off when he's getting close, because I just like, I'll go into autopilot mode and just think you know where you're at. And because that's a testament to how well you do in class. And, I just will like, oh shoot, yeah, Aaron can't see the clock, so he's going to need some help there. And
that's been one of the greatest. The things about CrossFit for me is that despite all this happening to me, that it's still been a space where I can feel able. And yes, I do need help, telling the meters or the cals on the rower or the bike, things like that. I need someone to run with me. And wall balls look a little different now, but for the most part, everything else has been the same. And it's been a space where I can come in and feel, like I don't have a disability, which, for me has been great. And also just a space where, I joined here about a year ago, and I have probably 40 people's numbers in my phone now, where a space, and I can call or text any of them, if it's snowing out or too hot, or I just don't feel like walking to the gym, where I can, I have friends now that I can call for rides. And so, for me, CrossFit's, for me, better than like a 24-hour fitness type space where, I can't imagine trying to navigate what that would look like, knowing what the machines are, to be able to have a coach who can, tell me my time or tell me these things, or, coach me up on different things like that. Just that personal experience that you get with CrossFit, especially for me, with someone with a disability, has been, just a huge blessing to have found. I think the timing of it in relation to my sight loss was just kind of meant to be.
It's funny that you talked about when you were getting started, how your perception of it was negative. And I think overall with a lot of people, I remember thinking that before there were CrossFit gyms, because I found it through workout forums online. So that's how I discovered it. And everything that was written in these forums were like, really negative about CrossFit. This is stupid, or, whatever it was. And for some reason, I just kept kind of looking at it and getting into it. And then I was like, I don't know. I'm watching like females do muscle ups and snatch weight that I knew I couldn't do at the time. And I had, I was like, as stupid as this sounds to you guys, I don't know. This looks really cool to me, and I think I want to try this. And then once I did it, I was hooked, just like you said, immediately. But it's funny that like most people who hear about it from people who don't, it's not people who do it who are like, this is dumb or negative. It's people who see it and something about it makes them maybe feel insecure. I don't know, like, or I don't want to do that, so it's bad. But yeah.
So I have a lot of questions for you.
Oh yeah, okay. Please, let's go.
So when you first got diagnosed, did you know there was a certain period of time you had until you lost your vision?
So when I initially got diagnosed, I was just at the point where driving was no longer safe. And, I could still see enough to get around without a cane. I didn't start using a cane until I got diagnosed in July. I didn't start using a cane till January, but I definitely should have started using one way earlier. I just didn't like the idea of showing the world that I, was legally blind now. And so when I got the diagnosis, the doctor said three things. He said it was this super rare hereditary disease, which had come from my mom's side, and which was really surprising to my dad and I, because we had never heard of this. It's asymptomatic, which means, whether it shows up or not is completely random. And so technically both my brothers and my mom have the same gene that I do, but it may never present in any of them. We had never known about it in the family. It wasn't, it was completely out of the blue for all of us. The second thing he shared was your question, was that I might go completely blind. And then the third thing was that there is no known cure. And, that was, both of those last things were the hardest to hear, because I up until that point, I'd been going through the whole diagnosis process, getting the MRI, doing all the different testing, just, with the belief, like anything else in my life, that, okay, we're going to figure out what this is. I'll get some medicine, whatever, then this will all be fixed. And then at that point, it was like hitting a brick wall. Like, no, that's not what's going to happen here.
So did you go through like special physical therapy to learn how to navigate, just kind of getting around and spatial awareness and?
Yeah, so they have programs, degrees called orientation and mobility. And so that's who taught me how to use my white cane. And then also when I moved to Columbus, you can, through, I think the state, they have orientation and mobility specialists who they taught me when I lived at my old place how to get from my apartment to the bus stop to my office, or to the next bus stop, and then that bus stop to my office. So, teaching me how to navigate the world, because, that's a whole thing. And
you're not learning that from the time you're a little kid, where there's like a long progression for people who are born that way, when they learn and they're, very good at it, and you're a grown up when you're dealing with
And
this.
then I also had to learn how to use a computer and a phone, again, using what's called screen reading technology. And that was, while getting a master's degree. So,
Did you finish up your master's degree?
I somehow was able to finish. I would spend hours on the phone with my dad. He would read articles to me, and I would tell him which quotes to pull out, and he would then email all these quotes to me so I could write papers. I would send him the paper so he could do the whole citation page for me. My parents were in Colorado while I was in Florida while all this was happening, which at the time was incredibly difficult for all of us. But in retrospect, I think was a huge blessing, because it didn't allow them to coddle me, and it really forced me to figure it out. And I think that's what's allowed me over the last 9 years to become the person that I am, and someone who lives a mostly normal life, besides driving.
And your hair looks perfect today. How do you do that?
I got a person. I travel solo all the time. I do CrossFit 5 days a week. I've hiked 14,000 foot mountains since this happened.
Cool. Which ones?
Pikes Peak.
I
think
love
you all
Pikes
were near
Peak.
that. Did you all do that one?
We did. Yeah, we did that one. Yeah.
I've done Pikes Peak. I've done 2 others in Colorado.
What were the other ones?
Mount Princeton and Mount Elbert, which
cool.
Elbert's the highest one in Colorado. So that was my first one post sight loss, and it was super emotional up there. And
I can't imagine. Just like I would be so. without seeing. Those trails are so narrow. You about lose it anyways when you get tired and.
And Pikes Peak has the most defined trail of all those. On Princeton, I took quite the tumble that kind of put things in perspective of like, okay, Aaron, maybe. It's okay to maybe take it down a notch and stick with more defined trails, because I went, did a somersault and almost went down the mountain on that one.
Oh my gosh, that's so scary.
I'm going to keep it a little more trail defined moving forward.
Well, that's so amazing. Just breaking through those walls of fear, I can't imagine. So would you, do you memorize the number of steps to get to certain places in your house? Is that how you work?
Luckily for me, and everyone's who has sight loss or any kind of other disability, has their own experience with that. Luckily for me, I do have enough sight to, similar at the CrossFit gym, be able to navigate it pretty seamlessly once I know it. I recently just moved back in May to a new apartment that I could. So my dad came out for a week because moving for anyone is tough, but then moving for me is especially difficult because, getting all the stuff down and then put into place and then figuring out the new area. So, figuring out where the trash is, figuring out where to take my guide dog out to go to the bathroom, figuring out where my mailbox is. And then on top of that, for me, I have these, we call them dots, but they're these things that you can put on things like the washer or the dishwasher, things like that, the stove, so that I know what to push to start the dryer.
Is it like Braille then for you?
Yeah.
Okay.
And honestly, one question I get pretty frequently is, do you know Braille? And I don't know any Braille, to be honest.
Because probably we're more advanced. That's
the thing. I always make the joke, maybe it's inappropriate, but that it's a great time to be blind. Because with my phone and computer, there's never rarely need a time for me where I feel like I wish I knew Braille.
So does your phone read back, like text to you then as you're putting it in? So you know if you make a mistake as well.
So anything I touch on the screen, it'll read back to me. With the computer, I don't use the screen or the mouse. It's all different keystrokes that I learned throughout that time that year in graduate school, and then have continued to learn since. And
So it probably really helped you that you had, I mean, just for communication daily, that you did go through grad school. I mean, it's 2 years of typing, 20-page papers. And
luckily I'd been there a year before. So, I knew I had a community there. The timing of it couldn't have been more perfect because I had friends there. I had, the staff at Florida State, they all knew me. And if I had tried to start my first year like that would have been incredibly difficult, or to start my first job after graduate school with all that going on would have been it would never have worked. Like, the timing was just perfect.
So did your site go from, did it degenerate into kind of like a, now more of a static state? Like it's just like how I'm hearing your story, it almost sounds like that a little bit.
Yeah, so it started in June of 2014, and then by like November of that year is kind of when it plateaued to where it is still to this day.
Okay. Man, that's fast.
Yeah. And, so I went back to graduate school in August, and, it was relatively high enough to where I was able to go run with a friend without using a tether. And then, when I went back for Thanksgiving in November, I didn't think I'd be able to run again. And that's when my dad introduced me to the tether, which was, a great blessing. And I still use that to this day. And
what is the tether?
so it's a kind of a little rope. And so I hold one end, and someone else, my guide, would hold the other end. And their role is really to kind of be my eyes. So make sure that, we don't run into potholes, make sure that we're, not running into the street. If it gets narrow, they put the tether behind their back, and that's my cue to kind of get behind them. And honestly, one of the big blessings here, and I've even emailed Brandon about it, was I typically take the 330 class with Drake. And one of the huge blessings here has been, with these running workouts, there's some where it is seamless to run with someone else in the class. But then there's others where when you're running and when others are running is so random.
Yeah.
And so for me, having Drake as a coach has been amazing because he's always willing to jump in and run with me.
It's good to have a super fit coach like him who's a semifinals athlete who can just get an extra workout in for the day.
and he doesn't have to do that. And so it's been this
cool.
amazing blessing to just have someone who without blinking is just like, yep, I got you. And I don't know. I mean, I don't know what it's like to be a coach or an owner when someone comes to you with, hey, this is, I can't see very well. Like, how are we going to make this work? So I don't know what that's like, but I just know my experience.
You've made it pretty easy on us, though. I mean, like I said, you handle yourself really well in class. You listen. So you're always moving, and I try to not. I'm a very showy coach, so I like to demonstrate. It's good for me to actually talk things through. I'm getting old and beat up, so like demonstrating everything all the time with my own body constantly without talking through it is something, if I want to last in this, is I got to do more of the talking part instead of like, okay, here's how we do a muscle up, and and doing it ice cold. And so I got to talk through things more, and you being in my class helps me do that, because I'm like, okay, use your words a lot more now when we're talking through a snatch progression or whatever it is, just so he's moving with us, and I'm not just kind of talking, saying a word here or there and just doing it over and over again. So
and what do you do for work now, Aaron?
Yeah, I work for OSU for the last 6 years, and it's kind of basically like an HR type of role. I do the hearings for sexual misconduct cases for the university. So not the most
that's heavy work. Right
happy
there.
work, but it's all remote, which has been a huge blessing, because then I don't have to do the whole bus thing anymore. And OSU's been really great with accommodations and things like that. So that's been really amazing. And then just based on what Brandon was saying there, I think one thing I always try and tell coaches when I'm coming to a new space is just make sure that you're being as descriptive as possible, like with the warm up and stretching and stuff, because saying something like, okay, then put your leg like this doesn't really help me at all. I'll turn to someone else in the class and be like, what are they doing? So that's one thing when I joined, I was like, hey, just, the more descriptive you can be, the more helpful it is for me.
It helps coaches too. I know I'm starting to think about trying to get a level 4, which you have to hit all your marks and P's and Q's. So it's going to help me if I end up taking that plunge and trying out for that. So
I decided to get my L1 in May of 2014, and then my sight loss started in June. So that was a great investment. I was able to coach for a couple weeks when I got back to graduate school. But then the sight loss got, to the point where it just didn't make sense for me or for the athlete. So I wasn't able to continue.
It would be challenging. You'd have to have some different technology to, just running the clock. Mm-hmm. Just the basic running the clock and hollering at people about the clock. That would be a challenge. It's something you were talking about, the tether, that was really cool. I just watched a video on the 100 meters in the Special Olympics where they're doing that. And the guys who carry the tethers have to be so fast because they have to be able to keep up with world-class athletes who are running just a balls-out 100-meter dash with a tether. These guys are running like 11-second hundreds.
Yeah.
Straight on, holding a tether with someone. I was just watching a video. I was like, oh, man. It was really cool. Like, both ends, like the visually impaired and the guy holding the tether. Because I'm like, they'd be dragging me while doing that. But man, your story's incredible, and I can't thank you enough for coming
really
and just telling your story. And I think it's gonna, help maybe inspire someone who listens, and maybe they have a disability and it's kept them out of CrossFit and getting them back in it, or or just help people who are around, like really understand your situation, because you do such a good job with it, where they might see an opportunity where, you're kind of like, lost, or a coach is like maybe forgetting something. Cause I'll be the first to admit occasionally, I'll forget something, and if a member can jump in and help a little bit, that's always nice.
I do have a couple more questions, because this is something that really like piques my interest, especially, because it pertains to me a little bit too. My right eye is like never out of the question to like lose that vision because the retina is attached. Have you ever experimented with stem cells or researched that at all as maybe a possible solution, like for gaining back your optic nerve function?
To be completely honest, I have not looked into stem cells. I've heard about them on different podcasts, and one thing that is partly kind of a unique part of my story is that during that first year in graduate school that second year when I went back, my family had discovered a clinical trial that was happening at the University of Miami. And so, part of me when I went back to graduate school thought that, I'm just going to get enrolled in this study, and then I'll go down there, and then I'll get an injection, and this will all be done. I kind of still was in that stage of denial. And I was able to somehow make it into the study. And then also I went down in, I think, maybe like September or October. And then they said, okay, we'll bring you back in a month, and then you'll get the injection. And I was like, okay, great. And I had convinced myself that once that happened, I'd get my sight back. Well,
and they injected your optic nerve, or where did they inject?
November turned into December, December turned into January, and it just kept getting pushed back and back. And, by April, the graduate school year was basically over. So it had kind of helped me continue getting through, but I was just kind of defeated by that point. I was like, you know what? I don't care about this study anymore. This is my life now. I'm going to move on. Yeah. So then 2 months later, I start my job at Virginia Tech, thinking that this study's just not a thing anymore. And within my first week of working there, they call and say, hey, can you come down next week for an injection? And so I was like, okay, so I called my dad, and I told him, I said, I don't even know if I want to do this anymore. I don't know if I want my sight back. And he was like, what? Like, why wouldn't
Because
you
you
want?
had made peace with it at that point.
Yeah, I was good. I was at acceptance.
It's tough to like, to gain like, hope again.
Yeah, and he said,
sure.
well, why wouldn't you want it back? And I said, I like who I am now more than who I was before. And he said, well, you can still be that person with your sight. And I was like, okay, that's a good point. So I went down like June of 2015 and got an injection in one of my eyes. It was just a clinical trial. And then over the next 3 years, went back down to Miami 15 different times for different checkups. And I never had any increase in my sight after that.
What was the injection?
It was some kind of virus type injection that was supposed to target something in the that one mitochondria in the optic nerve that had atrophied.
Okay.
I don't know if anyone's heard of CRISPR, but that's like gene editing technology,
Yep.
and I don't know. I'm of the belief that I think that with medical technology and CRISPR that there might be a chance for my sight to return in the future, but it's not something where I hold my breath and I pray every night that I'll get it back. I just don't think that's healthy.
Yep.
No, I mean, I agree. Even just with my left eye, I mean, it's something that Brandon and I discuss a lot, and it's really hard to even like almost fight for it or try to like think about working through it, because it's almost like you have to live in a state of like, I'm not accepting this. But I think, at least with my vision, I don't know if you've come to this point, but I really feel like everything happens for a reason.
Oh, totally. I mean, the people I've been able to meet, the experiences I've been able to have, and it's just, I think the timing of everything could not have been more intentional. And I've been, incredibly blessed throughout the last few years with everything that and the way that it's progressed. And like Brandon was saying, anyone who, hears this or is thinking about CrossFit, I think it's a great space where you can have a somewhat one-on-one experience where you're not having to pay, crazy money for personal coaching, but also getting a very personal experience. And that's been my experience the last 9 years.
And it's really neat that you are putting yourself out there with other people and compete. I mean, and I was just thinking like it would have been probably a lot easier, like more comfortable to have that one-on-one, but then you lose the whole community aspect. And just to feel like that you can show up and still do what everyone else is doing is really cool.
Yeah. One thing at the gym is, if I've talked with you enough, I might have your voice down, but the majority of people I probably don't. And so, when I first joined this gym, I put up a Facebook post and just kind of introduced myself and said it's definitely more helpful if you introduce yourself to me, because I don't know, facial recognition, even if I'm nose to nose with you, is impossible. So I don't know who people are at the gym, but now I have Brandon's voice down. I've got Drake's and all these other people's voices down where it's not an issue. But I think I ran into Coach Dave as I was walking in, and he said, "Hey, Aaron." And I said, "Hey, who's that?" Like I don't have his voice down yet. So I was like, he's like, "Oh, it's Coach Dave."
Yeah. And do you have any goals right now? Like, so what's the future hold for you, like athletically, or do you have any challenges that you want to cross off?
That is a great question. And I wish I had some inspirational answer right now. I think I think that's something I should probably put on paper and think about. I'm going to be doing another 14er next month. I'm going to be doing 10 days in Colorado.
That's one right there.
Yeah.
There we go. That's a great goal.
You're downplaying that. Like, well, nothing at the time I'm doing a 14er. Like,
That's amazing.
We did that.
We trained for that.
Yeah, a year and a half ago. We're like,
I'm still feeling good about
me.
that. Yeah.
And I've done a few CrossFit comps over the last few years. Did one with two guys from the gym here back in March, and that was awesome. We actually won that competition. That was pretty cool.
Awesome.
I'm going to be doing Mount Bierstadt next month. Yeah.
And where's that in Colorado?
That one is actually right outside Denver. And it's class 1, so it's a pretty defined trail. And those are kind of the class trails I'm going to stick to from now on, just based on, if I had my sight, I'd have no issue with class 2, class 3, but it just doesn't make sense now to put my life at risk.
I have issues with class 2 and 3. It's scary.
Yeah. I even started using like hiking poles now. And luckily, that one where I toppled over and almost went down the mountain was my first time ever wearing a helmet while hiking. My dad had just said, "Hey, you should wear this on the hike," and I was like, "Oh, that's a good idea." And luckily, I had it because I landed on my head. So I think someone's looking out for me up there.
Right.
Very cool.
Really neat.
Well,
really,
hey,
really
I think
cool.
that's a great place to leave it. And just for our time,
Perfect.
this has been awesome, man.
Well, thank you all for having me and for all the support at the gym.
Awesome.
You're amazing.